Hi, this is your mini lecture for Chapter 11 on power and political behavior. Here are your learning outcomes for this chapter. You may pause here to read them if you wish. First, we're going to start by talking about the concept of power. So power is really just this idea that somebody has the ability to influence another person. And we can learn to effectively use power by employing either our influence or an authority or both. And so there's a concept called the zone of indifference, which is a range in which attempts to influence, excuse me, the range in which attempts to influence a person will be perceived as either legitimate and acted on without a great deal of thought. So, do people basically perceive this power source as valid? Next, we're going to look at forms and sources of power in an organization. Reward power is when somebody uses power and they have the ability to control rewards that others want, those that they are influencing. So the agent would be the influencer and the target would be the person they're trying to influence. Coercive power is when you cause an unpleasant experience and use power in that form. Legitimate power is based on position and mutual agreement. So that's when somebody may technically have authority over somebody in the hierarchy of the organization. Referent power is based on interpersonal attraction. So whether the people get along or whether they are drawn to each other and are willing to listen to that person, etc. And then expert power is when somebody has specialized knowledge or skills that the target needs. Intergroup sources of power. So a control of critical resources is said to have occur, or a group is said to have power when it controls an important resource that's desired by another group. So we can see that when somebody controls a resource, that can cause a power source. So maybe it's they control the budget of an organization, or they control the human resources and delegating people. Strategic contingencies are activities that other groups depend on in order to complete their tasks. So a contingency is just, I need this in order to do this, and because of that, power occurs. We're going to look at how ethics applies to using power. There's different viewpoints when it comes to power and ethical considerations. Utilitarian outcomes basically say that I'm going to use my power, my behavior should result in the greatest good for the greatest number of people, so I'm going to use my power in order to do that. Individual rights is things such as free speech, privacy, due process, so I'll use power for the purpose of free speech, privacy, due process. And then distributive justice is I'm going to use my power to ensure that all parties are treated equitably and fairly. So you can see that it could be ethical and it could be unethical. Power can be both. We can use power to do very great things. We can also use power to do things that maybe aren't so great. So again, like that just brings us into this concept of positive versus negative power, all right? And so personal power is when we use our power for our own personal gain. This would be really a negative face of power. Social power is when we're trying to accomplish a group goal. This would be a positive power, if that group goal is a positive thing, obviously. And different power oriented characteristics of management. And in order to use power successfully, there has to be a belief in a system of authority. There has to be a preference for work and discipline. We have to believe in justice and what's better for the greater good and doing right. And that's how we use power in a positive way. There are some symbols of power and powerlessness. So Cantor's symbols of power are outlined here, and you can read about them. And then the symbols of powerlessness, and you can read about those as well. And when you're creating a powerlessness, a less powerful situation or a negative powerful situation. So I'll just let you read about those. Next, we're going to look at organizational politics and look at how political skill and some influences and some tactics to to influence others. All right, so organizational power is when people use power and influence in an organization. I'm sure you've all seen it in your work areas. Political behavior is when somebody does something that's not officially sanctioned or they're not necessarily told to do by their organization or their supervisor. And they use this to influence others in order to meet their own personal goals. And, you know, you maybe have heard the saying that they have their own agenda, or people have their own agendas, and this is where this political behavior comes into play. These are the different tactics that are used in organizations. You can also read this in your books. Pressure, upward appeals, exchange, you owe me a favor, So pressure is, if you don't do this, this will happen. Upward appeals, I'm going to report to my boss, or my boss supports this. Exchange is, you owe me a favor, or you do this for me, I'll do this for you. Coalition, all the other supervisors agree with me, I'll ask you in front of the whole committee. Integration, you can do this job right, I can always count on you. Rational persuasion, this new procedure will save X amount of dollars. These are just some examples. Inspirational appeals, consultation, trying to get people on your side. I've had this one happen to me where something controversial is coming up and they'll come to my office and specifically talk to me and try to get me on their side. Political skills, so some people are just more skilled politically and they're able to get things done through really favorable interpersonal communications and relationships. Politically skilled individuals are really good at understanding other people, and they use this information to influence others in order to meet personal or organizational skills. So it can be used for good and positive and negative. So some of the dimensions of political skill include being socially astute, having good influence, being able to network, really being sincere, coming off as empathetic. Next, we'll look at ways to manage political behavior. All right, so, recognize that politics are happening within pretty much everything we do, and try to diffuse it. Have open communication. Try to reduce political behavior by having this open communication. Engage in participative management. Tell people what your expectations are. Encourage cooperation. Try to manage your resources well. Try to provide a supportive organizational climate so that you don't have negative political behavior at play. Manage relationships with superiors, right? Know your goals and objectives. Know your strengths and weaknesses. Talk about your preferred work styles. Assess yourself and what your needs are and your personal style. There's something called Strengthsfinder that I've used a lot that is really helpful in identifying what your strengths and weaknesses, what your strengths are, and really playing to them in an organization. Develop and maintain healthy relationships. Have mutual expectations. Keep your superiors informed. Be dependable. Be honest. Be selective when you approach your boss or superior for time and resources. Another way to kind of manage power in an organization is through empowerment. And so managers can empower others in their organization. Having high expectations, letting people know that they can do this. Let your employees participate in decision making. Set inspirational and meaningful and really relevant and achievable goals. All right, so that was the mini lecture for this chapter. If you have any questions, please contact me.